What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here, bringing them the video. Today I'm bringing a video on Power Rangers Hyperforce episode 25. This episode is the season finale, which is great to know that we're at the season finale, but at the same time it's also very sad because we have no idea whether or not we're actually getting a second season. So, and that's kind of sad, and also just the fact that, like, you know, you never want to see a show go. And as we know right now, you know, as far as things go, there's nothing set up specifically set in motion for a second season. Now, are people expecting one or hoping for one? People are hoping for one. Nothing is, you can't confirm anything. They're not confirming anything, not yet. Personally, I don't expect them to have any real big news for quite some time. I think that overall they need to see what happens. One of the big things you have to keep in mind is that if you're someone that subscribed to Hyper RPG in the past, you know, you need to stay consistent. You need to be, you know, part of it if you really want that, you know, that shows support. If you know, show your support for Hyper RPGs in general, that's very, very important, because to them, you know, this was a great thing, but they need to see that, you know, they can keep a consistently large audience that isn't just primarily based in this one show. And that's very important to the company for Hyper RPG, and that's also very important to Saban Brands, because, like, you know, they want it to be this entire thing where, like, everyone benefits. You know, it's not just meant for this one show. You know, they love that their own properties can do great things, and I personally love it too, but at the same time they want to see us watching other shows from Hyper RPG. And, you know, you don't have to go crazy with it, but they want to see that, you know, we're a strong audience and we will support Hyper RPG in order for us to get future seasons of this. If we want a second, if we want a third, if we want a fourth season, you know, whatever, we need to show our support. We need to show that we care about Hyper RPG. We need to show that we care about Hyperforce. We show that a lot, and I'm always that way. I try my best to really support it as much as I can. Anyway, just in general, as I said before, this was such a great episode. I want to get into it. Before I start that, though, I have one important announcement for those that didn't actually get to watch the episode live. Power Rangers Hyperforce confirmed at the very end, actually Melissa from Hyperforce confirmed that there are now 2 pieces of merchandise online. Now, these are not, you know, figures or morphers or anything like that. They're t-shirts, 2 t-shirts. One t-shirt has the badge logo symbol that you may know for Hyperforce, and then there's another one which also has the badge logo, but it has above the badge logo it says "Time for Burritos," and it has a burrito in the center of the logo, and the burrito has like strands of meat or whatever in the different colors of the Ranger colors, and it's a different print style compared to say the standard one. So keep that in mind, because the standard one is like what you see typically. And as far as things go, they're not that expensive. They're about $28 if you get the t-shirt. If you get the sweatshirt version of these, it's about $45. So keep that in mind. I actually checked these things out because I actually decided to purchase the badge one. I didn't decide to purchase the burrito one just because I didn't feel like it. You know, you can, but keep this in mind. I would, if you're going to purchase these, do it now, because they're gonna, from what I can tell, it looks like they're only gonna be available till the 8th of May at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So keep that in mind. Check your, you know, time specific locations. You know, obviously if you live in California, that's 5 p.m. You know, I believe that's Pacific time. So keep that in mind. And otherwise, I would definitely recommend it. It's only going to be available for a short time, and then as far as when you can actually expect to get it, what I would say is expect it, based on the website, it said between May 17th to June 1st. So yes, it's going to take some time. Again, they're having to actually develop the designs. They're mainly into like the pre-order phase of things, where like they're gonna make it, but they need to see like pre-orders, and obviously all that stuff is important. You know, as far as things go, I'm expecting that this is going to be, something that will definitely be available to us. It's just that we need to, show that we're all interested. And just in general, I would recommend buying it. It is on a specific site, and I will have a link in the description below. So if you are wondering what the link is, I do have links to both t-shirts and / sweatshirts, depending on what you choose. You do have the options when you go to the actual link itself, so keep that in mind. Again, t-shirts 28, sweatshirts 45. Very important. Short time. Do it now before it's too late, because as soon as it reaches 8 p.m. on May 8th, you can't do it. So that's all good. Moving on to the actual episode itself, Power Rangers Hyperforce. Today's episode was something else. Let's just say that much. So in the previous episode, it ended in a big way with us seeing that Thrax was destroyed, Zordon was captured, and we immediately think, okay, what's going to happen now? Is the Alliance really dead? How is this going to all work? Well, at this point, what does end up happening is that the Hyperforce Rangers head off into space, and we also, by the way, see at the very beginning of the episode that Malika is dressed up as Rita Repulsa. She's wearing this awesome cosplay costume. Like, she looks amazing in it. She does the voice a number of times. Very fun stuff. If you're a Power Rangers fan, you have to love it. You have to love it. Just too much fun. This episode was also big on megas, being those enemies this episode, because there were a lot of monsters that were in this episode, but there were also some interesting Rangers that were in this episode, though there were no actual guests. Although technically, if you wanted to say there was one, you could say maybe Zach, but I don't think you would count him as a guest. He kind of like assisted, like he does in a lot of episodes for this show and other shows in general for Hyper RPG, or he DMs and all that. So anyway, what does end up happening is that Chloe begins piloting her Zord. She's the one that's leading the Rangers towards the ship that actually captured Zordon, because she was with Zordon when he was captured. And what ends up happening is that there's like 7 or so Alliance ships. And what what they end up doing is that they're heading to the different ships, and they're all Time Force ships. That's confirmed to be the fact. They're planning on doing a sneak approach from above the ships through a hatch, which is an interesting tactic that they decided to employ. The Rangers decide to actually do that. They land on the ship. Alpha 5 comes with them. Obviously, Alpha is still Vesper at this point, so that's very important to remember. But eventually, they do open up the hatch. They enter into the location. Chloe goes in there, and Vesper's there already. And what ends up happening is that they search the building. They determine the whole layout of the location. And eventually, when the other Rangers join in, they soon enough see that there's like this entranceway that seems unlocked, and there's proof that it's completely unlocked, but there is a keypad there. And what happens is that eventually Vesper and Eddie end up doing some tech work and discover that it's all good, and they manage to break open the door. When they enter in there, they actually see that there is a man trapped in a energy barrier, and they decide at that point to go in and check and see who it is. When they go to confront the man, he immediately recognizes Chloe, and Chloe recognizes him, and it turns out that this man is Chloe's father. And it's a very interesting thing. Mr. Ashford is there, and he's been captured there as a prisoner, at least that's what they say. So what does end up happening is that eventually the Rangers are being told how to deal with this ship, and find Zordon, and where he'll probably be locked up. Like the fact that he'll be locked up further back into the ship rather than towards the front of the ship where the main power is, because if he's too close to the main power source, it could screw up all the power of these ships. So they keep him further back, and because he's still really powerful even though he's in a weakened state. It's just that even though that's the case, he's still so dangerous that he could cause significant problems to the power to the ship. And so what ends up happening is that eventually the Rangers are dealing with all this, and they're about to go and find out what's going on and everything, when suddenly Chloe's father ends up trapping the Rangers inside of a barrier, which actually happens as a result of the Hyperforce ship being stolen. Yes, the Hyperforce ship is being stolen, and the important thing to remember is that the only way that that could happen is if a Time Force Ranger or a Hyperforce Ranger were to go aboard and man the ship using their morpher. And the thing is that that's exactly what does end up happening. A Time Force Ranger. So keep that in mind, because what does end up happening is that it seems like it was all planned, and it turns out that, you know, this new character we just met that we've been wondering about for quite some time, and we also learn about the fact that, like, Chloe's mother's been dead, and that's the thing that really, like, hit me hard. I mean, I burst into tears this episode when I heard that, and I saw like, you know, Megan's reaction. I mean, oh, it's such an emotional thing, and, you know, she was just so broken up. I mean, it was just, oh, it's hard to believe this. And then you end up finding out that the father is just like, he's not a good guy. In fact, he's way worse than we ever expected him to be. And it's pretty amazing, like, how they managed to make this thing work. I'm not sure, like, what like it works. It's just, it's weird. I don't know how to describe it. Like, you would expect it to be someone more predictable, yet at the same time, it kind of makes sense because, again, we knew about that episode previously where Thrax met the guy with the lab coat and everything, which we didn't see. Like, they didn't mention any of that kind of detail here, but it is interesting to note that there is some like this is what's going on here. If you haven't already clued into what I'm kind of hinting at, if this is your first time hearing about stuff, so what does end up happening is that eventually the Rangers learn of the fact that there are Time Force Rangers on the ships, and what ends up happening is that at first Vesper decides to, you know, escape Alpha and, you know, use her new body, which her new body is like Vesper 2.0. Isn't completely done, but has like most of her stuff fixed up. And when she has her mind inserted into it, all of her memories return, including the ones that she gained after being dead. So when she was brought back to life, all those memories plus the ones that she had in the past are all returned to her. So she remembers everything. In fact, she remembers her own death, and that's a very important detail that happens later on in the story, and it's pretty terrible to think about. But yeah, she actually has that memory in her mind, which is insane. I mean, who would want to, like, have that? I mean, it's a weird thought. Like, I don't even know how to contemplate such an idea. But, like, wow, yeah. I mean, wow, that's insane. And so what does end up happening is that you know, they end up having to go. Well, Vesper ends up having to deal with fighting Scorpina. She also ends up confronting Wes, you know, the Time Force Red Ranger, who's also in the ship, and she eventually frees him, and he morphs, and he actually has his chronomorpher right on him at the time, which is important because most of them don't have that situation, and yet he somehow does. So what does end up happening is that eventually they're finding out about like how there's 3 other ships that have Time Force Rangers that are helping allow those ships to work. The other ones, we have no idea as to how they're working. It could be that there are other characters from Time Force. It could be something entirely unknown to us, or something that we'll have to wait and see if there is a second season. Again, keep it in mind. It depends on if there's a second season for us to even know what's going on there. But what does end up happening is that the Rangers have to split up. We end up seeing that Alpha 55 is told by Chloe to actually man her Zord to bring the Rangers to the different ships and try to rescue the prisoners, which are the Time Force Rangers that are being held captive. So what we end up seeing is that first, Eddie is sent to one of the ships where he has to rescue one of the Rangers. And in his situation, what we end up seeing is that, I'm trying to make sure that that's right. Yeah, it's Vesper. And then we end up seeing that Eddie has to, like, ends up jumping in there The location has a lot of things floating in it. We end up seeing that he ends up on this island that seems to be an illusion. In fact, he ends up seeing Vesper, which doesn't make any sense at all because Vesper's supposed to be on the Hyperforce ship, and she's trying to be alluring and trying to pull him in and, you know, make him fall for her, you know, make him fall for her. And what does end up happening is that, you know, all this is occurring and he tries to push her away, and then from there we end up seeing on another ship that Jack has to deal with a different situation where he's having to travel through the ship, and he ends up being confronted by Goldar, and at that point he actually ends up meeting one of the Time Force Rangers, which he meets the yellow Time Force Ranger, Katie. So he has to deal with rescuing her, fighting Goldar, you know, dealing with like destroying his wings and you know, defeating him. And at the same time, we also have it where Joe and Marv go off together to go rescue the last one of those, which again, we still don't even know. I still didn't even mention the one about, you know, Eddie, because, you know, Eddie's, we don't learn until later on. But when it comes to Joe and Marv, they head in, and I'm trying to remember what they are fighting in this episode. Oh, right. They head in, they eventually enter into a room where they end up confronting Doomstone, who tries to revive Thrax, and doesn't really work out. They keep on trying to deal with all that. Eventually they're trying to actually rescue Lucas, the blue Time Force Ranger, which is very cool. And the thing is that like Joe and Lucas have a fight because of like Nadira and all that, which I love that. I love that idea. Super awesome. And they do have to deal with everything. In the meantime, what we do end up seeing is that Chloe has to talk to her father. We end up discovering the truth about, you know, her mother being, you know, her mother dying and having a fall, which later on we actually learn more about what that exact fall is, because it really isn't a fall. And the fact is that there's several hints as to how, you know, he was following a certain path, and, you know, he's doing certain things, and he wants her to join him. And basically the whole idea here is that basically Chloe's father is the real Alliance leader. Like, Thrax was just a pawn that was meant to represent the Alliance leader, but Chloe's father, Mr. Ashford, is really supposed to be the Alliance leader, which is insanely interesting. Definitely not what I was expecting, but like once we saw this and we heard everything that he was saying, I mean, my God, the guy is an evil man. I mean, like, he, you know, because of his, we end up learning that, like, because his wife didn't agree with his motives, he basically decided to kill her. And he refers to it as a fall. And then he expects his daughter to suddenly join him and, you know, fight alongside him, even though in reality she doesn't want to kill anyone. She doesn't want to hurt anyone anymore. She wants peace. And it's just like, oh God, this man. I don't even know what to say. You know, it's just like one of those situations where, you know, you feel something for these characters because you're just like, oh, these situations are just painful. It just, oh, I feel for them. I grieve for them. I want them to feel at peace. And, you know, oh gosh, the way that, I mean, talk about a way to end a season, like, with pain and sorrow, and, you know, you want to just cry, like, oh God, oh, man, this episode, man, I just don't even know what to say. But anyway, what we do end up seeing is that Eddie, in the meantime, has to deal with fighting Lokar, actually. Yes, Lokar's in this episode from Mighty Morphin. And we end up discovering that, like, Eddie breaks the illusion, which it turns out that the Time Force Ranger that he's rescuing is Trip, which is very cool. So Trip and Eddie work together. Trip has his psychic powers, which is awesome. I love it. And we also see Eddie working alongside him, fighting Lokar, trying to deal with his illusions, which is a very easy thing to do. In the meantime, we also see that Jack and Katie work together. They initially fight each other, but they actually end up having a little bit of like a romantic thing going on without it being like too romantic, but like this tough and brute kind of thing, which it really works with their characters. Like it's so funny how like each of these like groups kind of work together in a way. Like, you know, Eddie's pretty smart and resourceful, Trip is pretty smart and resourceful, Katie's kind of tough and also like a nice character, and like Jack's tough and also nice at times. You know, it's like they're matching them perfectly. And like Lucas has like this coolness to him, and is someone that has like these difficulties with like Nadira and everything else. And like, you know, it's just these connections and like how these characters kind of work together and how they sort of, you know, relate to each other. Vesper and Wes is also really interesting to see, because we do end up seeing that whole fight happen. Eventually they manage to have it where Vesper ends up dragging Scorpina out through the airlock, and what ends up happening is that like Wes ends up helping as well. And like Scorpina basically at one point gives up, and when she's sent through the airlock, you have to remember that they're in the hyperstream, so when she's sent out, she actually falls into the normal time stream, but she doesn't fall into like the normal time. She falls into another time period, which we have no idea what the time period is. I'd love to know what the time period could be, and I'm sure we might know during the second season if we have one, and I'd love to know what they could do from there, because oh my god, I mean, just imagine what possibilities there are. And again, that is something that's very important, because that's another factor that is key to the overall story towards the end. Now, what we do also see is that besides Eddie, besides Vesper, you know, Joe and Marv end up having to rescue Lucas and getting his chronomorpher. We also end up finding out about a big factor, which is the fact that Chloe's father ended up setting it up where if the Hyperforce Rangers don't get out of the ship, and if the ship isn't stopped in like 10 minutes or so, like each of these ships, they'll all explode. And what ends up happening is that like they basically have to rescue the Time Force Rangers, get their chronomorphers, and also escape the ships in order to prevent complete destruction of themselves. You know, in other words, they could all die because they're on these alliance ships. So what does end up happening is that we see all this happen. I said before, you know, Jack has to deal with Goldar. It's Goldar, Scorpina, Lokar, and also why am I forgetting? I think I got everyone. Yeah. But yeah, my point. We see all this happen. We see Chloe even try to stop her father, who tries to escape at one point. Eventually, what this leads to is that Chloe tries to break the barrier. She even uses her abilities of like her whirlwind to try to lift herself up, but then when she, out of anger, and then when she calms down, what ends up happening is that she tries to like, you know, reason with her father. Things don't work out, and eventually her father does end up escaping. From here, what we do end up seeing is that the Hyperforce Rangers go to retrieve Chloe because she ends up being unconscious. Eddie uses his healing charge, and at that point what ends up happening is that the Hyperforce Rangers go to you know, speak to Chloe about everything they learn. They eventually end up meeting up in the Hyperforce ship, where we end up seeing the 4 Time Force Rangers and the 6 Hyperforce Rangers all together. At that point, they end up discussing what's happened, and they determine the fact that, you know, Chloe's father is definitely the Alliance leader. The Hyperforce Rangers continuously are into hugging each other because, you know, they're feeling all sorts of emotion. I mean, Vesper especially is in a really hard position, because what does end up happening is that the Hyperforce Rangers have to summon back their allies that they had during the previous episode. So like Merlin, Lena Song, Jem, and Aisha, and also and not Andros. Andros stays where he is because he's supposed to stay in the time period. But what does end up happening is that those that are there end up having to have their minds wiped by Trip, which is very important. And the thing is that they lose their memories, and they're then meant to go back to their time periods and then, like, you know, just recover from there. So that's very important to remember. So they can't remember any of this. So then from there, what we do end up seeing is that Vesper wants to lose her memory. She doesn't want to remember a lot of the stuff that she now knows, especially about like how she died and everything, because she has that experience in her mind. I mean, like, I can't imagine such a thing. Like, oh God, like just a scary thought. Like, being able to have that. I mean, that's nightmare fuel, basically, for someone. I mean, that's a really, really freaky idea, and it's pretty crazy. But at the same time, what does end up happening is that Eddie is told by Vesper to actually destroy all copies of her data, so that if she dies for good. Like, she can't be brought back anymore, which is very interesting to note, because she doesn't want to have to keep on reliving her death. I get it. And that's pretty amazing, and what an interesting thing for her to do. And again, these characters are all very broken right now, and they now have to go back to their own time period to see what needs to be done and what they can do, because now the history has been changed for good. They end up going back to the year 3017, and by the way, Lena's song ends up disappearing in this episode, so we have no idea where she is. We'll have to wait and see, because it does happen when they try to go to her time period. Turns out she disappears somehow, so she could have jumped off, she could have traveled to another time period. Very unclear. But what we do see is that when the Hyperforce and the Time Force Rangers arrive in the year 3017, there's statues of Rita, Zed, and Thrax around the area, and that apparently like Nadira is now like called Lady Nadira, and she's still evil, and basically like evil is ruling. Like, that's the general idea, and Jen is now actually part of the resistance that's trying to go against the villains. But in this case, she's leading it, but she's not in her regular outfit. She's wearing like more of a military outfit, which is very different from what most of us are used to with her character. And she doesn't really remember the Time Force Rangers all that well. In fact, she doesn't remember them at all. And then from there, they end up having to go off. Marv ends up giving up his communicator so that they can keep in touch with Wes. And in the meantime, we end up seeing that once on the ship, the Rangers end up looking at Alpha and watching the clock as they have to go back in time, and they're told by Wes prior to leaving the time period that in order to restore things to normal, they have to go back and make sure that several things are done properly in time in order to ensure that things will work properly. And the only people that will ever remember any of these changes and what the world might have been had certain things not happened would be those Rangers. So in other words, Wes will lose his memory of it. All these Rangers will. In fact, every Ranger that was affected in some way will lose their memories of this alternate future that they're now going into. And from here, that's where the episode pretty much ends. What we do see as a bonus scene is that apparently Rita and Zed end up waking up with increased power after Thrax's Thrax wave that ends up happening in the previous episode, and with their increased power they plan to take over the universe, pretty much, I'm assuming. And also they're going to make a new Golder, because Golder was destroyed, as we saw already. So that's very important to remember. Overall, as I said before, Power Rangers Hyperforce has been a great show. If you are a fan of Power Rangers Hyperforce, I just want to say to you all, like, thank you for supporting it. And I'm a supporter of it myself, and I'm thanking you guys, because that's the reason why we get this show. That's the reason why people like. It's great to know that there are fans out there for Power Rangers Hyperforce. I mean, thank you for liking the show. I love the show a lot. I think it's been a really, really great thing. I'm as much as everyone is hoping for a second season, I'm hoping for one too. You never know. Again, as I said before, definitely purchase the Hyperforce t-shirts. If you're a Power Rangers Hyperforce fan, or if you're a Power Rangers fan in general, I would strongly advise it. Don't miss this opportunity. It is so critical to take advantage of this, and I totally get why they're actually making it till May 8th also, because of the fact that like some people aren't going to even know about this stuff until next week. because the episode won't go up on YouTube until next week, so they have to give us at least a week, which makes a lot of sense. But keep this in mind: if you're someone that's online and you're looking to get Power Rangers Hyperforce merchandise, please do it now, because you're not going to have all the time in the world, and they need to see that there's enough doesn't mean that they're not going to like produce these shirts, but like they need to see interest in the merchandise in order for them to do other things. If they see interest in the merchandise, if they see interest in the TV show, if they see interest in all these different forms of media, those are all key indicators that basically tell them they can do more. They can do even more. And Saban wants to do it. Hyper RPG wants to do it. We want to do it. But it's all about that money. It's all about that consistency in viewership through Hyper RPG, through supporting Hyper RPG and providing money and helping out and doing all that kind of stuff. Again, they're not expecting like insane donations, but being a support, being someone that's trying to keep them afloat. Because again, they're a small company. They're they do fairly well, but they're definitely not anything that stands on 2 feet and is filthy rich. They have money, but they're not in perfect shape. And doing these kind of things and knowing that they can do it and pay for it with a realistic amount of money and everything is super critical. I mean, again, if you're wondering how things worked for this year, apparently these past 25 episodes alone, I remember hearing this, cost about $100,000, which is not that bad if you know how TV shows actually work. But for a show like this to cost $100,000, that really does say a lot. And again, that has to do with a lot of factors like sponsorships, branding, all sorts of different things, getting the actors in here. Oh my god, I mean, there's just so many different factors to keep in mind in order for this show to actually occur. And again, you're using a known license. It's not like you're just using a brand new concept. Like, though Power Rangers Hyperforce is its own version of Power Rangers with its own, it's its own canon, as we've said several times before. As far as things go, it's still a very important. It's still a very different thing from most Hyper RPG programs that they have, because most of the time they're 100% original products and concepts that are not being brought over or connected from something that exists and is a known franchise. A lot of times these are just something that they make up. Like, if you watch any of their programs now, other than Hyper RPG, none of them are based on something that really exists already. They actually were speaking a lot about certain programs that they want to do or they're thinking about doing, but as far as whether or not they'll get like the licensing and the copyrights and dealing with all that other stuff, we'll have to wait and see. It would be great if that occurs. Again, it's an amazing thing. The show just in general has been a delight. It's been so much fun to watch. The content is great. The characters are fun. I've said this before about which Rangers I would say are my favorites. I mean, to me, my favorites are Jack. Eddie would be second. Vesper would be third. Marv or Joe. Like, I could go either way, really. I would probably go with Marv just because he's more developed. And then Joe, and then Chloe. Don't get me wrong, I like Chloe, but Chloe to me has been a hard character to like at certain points. These past 2 episodes, though, have been some of the better, have been probably her best episodes, in my opinion. Just because she's super strong in these episodes, in the senses of not just like, oh, we have a battleizer. No. In the senses of like her character, in the senses of her maturity, in the fact that she's not all about, I'm going to use my battleizer every single second. I'm not gonna be focusing on the burritos. No, I'm gonna take this seriously. I'm gonna take the time to really be methodical and think out my actions and do right by the universe and not mess around here. Like, this is serious stuff. We are changing how time works here. And props to Megan for this episode. She did a really great job. Props to all these Rangers. all of them have their moments, and I love it. I love the show in general. I mean, Hyperforce has been such a great show. Again, as I said before, please purchase the merchandise. I would strongly recommend it. Again, t-shirts $28, sweatshirts $45. Do it now before they, aren't really available anymore. I don't know if they'll be coming back after the 8th, or will they only be available on eBay as for people that bought them when the run was happening. Again, we'll have to wait and see, but keep this in mind that, all this and more is coming in the near future. They did say, and this is another thing that's very important to remember, there are future announcements planned for Hyperforce. Does that mean that it ensures that we're getting a second season? No, don't assume that. Do not, because that is not something we can assume yet, even though I would love to, and even though a lot of us are hoping for it. Don't assume that, but what they do say is that there are more announcements. So that could be new product, that could be other things entirely different. That could be things like maybe Power Morphicon, where maybe they'll have like a special episode for Power Morphicon at Power Morphicon for a few hours. You never know. Again, we'll have to wait and see. I believe that Malika and Cameron and maybe Zach might be going to Power Morphicon, like just to hang out if they don't actually do a panel. We'll have to wait and see, but I know that Malika is definitely going to show up to Power Morphicon. So if you're a Hyperforce fan, definitely, go, look for her when you go. Because I'm going to Power Morphicon, and I would definitely love to meet her and just say, like, I'm such a big fan of your franchise, of Power Rangers Hyperforce, and thank you for this past year of Power Rangers. It's been an amazing thing. So keep this in mind. I would love to know your opinions about this episode and about Power Rangers Hyperforce in general. Do you think we're getting a second season? What things are you hoping for to see if we get a second season regarding this alternate universe with this corrupted timeline that where it seems like we're entering into now? I would love to know your guys' opinions below. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Samurai 71, and goodbye, guys.